Welcome everybody, and welcome to the third day of Experimenter Curators Hub 2020. Uh, after a round of wonderful, invigorating, deeply insightful conversations yesterday, we begin today the third day of the Hub uh, with two wonderful speakers, Dorian Chong and Alessandra Vincentelli, both of whom who have been in large institutions of different kinds for long durations of time, and both of who have returned to the hub now after to think about their work as well as a kind of way to think about the hub um, as well. Over the last days, we've spoken about several crucial aspects of the previous presenters' works, and many conversations have opened up to new possibilities and new directions. Um, Today, we will have there's a slight change in the schedule. I would just like to bring to your notice. Adam Simchik has is not going to be able to join the hub. He's had a very terrible personal loss that he's faced yesterday. He was there on the first day of the hub, and he will not be able to join us today. But we look forward to Dorian and Alessandro right after we finish the introductions. And at the end of the conversation, I think we felt that the yesterday's open mic or open house way of conversing was quite successful, and we will do the same. For people who were here yesterday, um, at the end of the last presentation, we will open up the conversation to all participants, which means you'll be able to switch on your video and your audio, but you should keep your audios on mute and ask questions and interact as you go along. I would take this opportunity once again to thank Natasha, who's been really amazing holding fort for us. And our partners, Australia Council for the Arts, Goethe-Institut, British Council, Take on Art Magazine, as well as Sky Arundhati Thomas for writing these wonderful blogs. Please see them on our website, on our blog, ECH blog, as well as our experimenter team. You guys have been fantastic, and I'm going to now hand over to Natasha to take things forward. Thank you very much.
Welcome everybody to the third day of Experimenter Curators Hub. We're now closer to concluding, but hoping you're enjoying what has been shared so far. Let us carry with us what it means to share this deliberative time, as Rax has put it, to remain associated in our laboring capacities and associative in our imagination against the odds. I've been revisiting Lauren Berlant's book, Cruel Optimism from 2011, where she argues against resilience of a certain kind. And it feels as though that's an important notion to perhaps also bring in the kind of paradoxes of what it means to be resilient, because there are many kinds of resilience, and there is the kind of resilience that might feed alienation, that might feed corporate capital, that might feed off of promises that the state has retracted, be that upward mobility to durable intimacy. And so instead, she prompts to understand fully our codependent and mutating nature that is enduring the dramas of adjustment as contingency, trauma, pleasure, and precarity unfold simultaneously within the stretched out present. Yesterday, Dr. Luli Eshraghi began by sharing with us their grandmother's artistic practice and community care, forming networks of global indigenous curatorial practice as part of their work, which means to them extending matrices of kinship, intellectual values that stem from indigeneity, and relational future building. On what it means to be speaking and acting as multi-gendered, spiritual, and sensuous beings, addressing through cultural labor heterogeneous relations with the sky, water, land, habitat, what they call beyond our skin, ancestors and deities. I had to consider that we must take caution about how our own aesthetic conditioning and colonial erasures have led us to compose and sustain hierarchies between contemporary art and living traditions, between secular, so-called secular art and sacred art, between what is thought of as conceptual versus what is labeled exotic, what is labeled relational versus what is labeled the alienating art object for the market. Let us comprehend where our own limits lie and what it means to speak with or speak nearby, as Srinthi Minha suggests, rather than speak for or speak over. Luli also addressed how networks of migration, commuting cultures, trade have shaped diaspora and belonging, but also mass displacement, carceral punishment, and ecological devastation. In archiving time-based works, in particular from Samoa, Luli used the term animated bark cloth, which I found significant, to relay how moving image works from cultural spheres and indigenous practices require their own lexicon to be understood, not only at a technical level, but rather at an ontological one. And I think there were many such examples of what it means to build a creative lexicon that is transgressive, that exceeds what is a heteronormative, West-centric norm or normative provision to speak about the arts that we are engaged with. Taking us further, Reem Fada in her practice urged to centralize the performance of life as the substance for cultural work. She discussed artistic efforts from Morocco, from Jordan, that she is working with and will work with in the near future, that have shaped pan-Arab cultural movements, internationalist alliances, and pedagogy, such as also the Casablanca School came forward as an important example in her work. She talked about the phenomenal oeuvre of Mohammed Cheba, Farid Belkahia, etc. Mohammad Mehlehi, who recently passed on as well, all important figures in the Casablanca School. And also how abstraction, calligraphic modernism, and the plastic arts sharpened public engagement while breaking hierarchies of high versus low art within the larger pan-Arab region, but also in Africa, and also as we discussed in the Q&A in South Asia too. Professor Naman Ahuja unpacked the exhibition India and the World, which took place in 2 iterations at CSMVS in Mumbai and at the National Museum in Delhi, 2 very distinct editions of that major project that was carried out in partnership with British Council, with the British Museum, but included a range of museum objects from smaller museum collections that included bringing forward a new set of relationalities, which were accommodating what could be a plural history telling that attempted to negate the nationalist view and gaze upon those objects, which also challenged the Universal Museum in its framing capacities that are so quickly transported back into the erstwhile colonized territories. The idea of historical objects acting within and shaping world civilizational discourse beyond the nationalist framing has been important to several projects that Naman has undertaken. This exhibition also addressed, as he put it, not only what India produced or gave to the world, but what India learned from the world. And a kind of, once again, challenging what might be, as I put it, a risky cosmopolitanism, not the smooth linkages of cosmopolitan histories that perhaps provide, again, a clean geopolitical narrative for the power balances that are present today, but a asynchronous, risky one. Such flows of transcultural exchange, syncretism, and subversive readings, privileging also contemporary positions around gender, class, and caste, are currently also a top priority for many of us practitioners, including Naman Ahuja, thinking really what kinds of knowledges are ostracized, what knowledges are considered outcast, not only outside the canon, but are made outcast. And how do we speak to that, not speak for that, but rather speak with that as well? What kinds of decanonizing operations are required at this stage to deal with that question of caste, but also of Islamophobia in terms of Indian history, of also histories from the ancient world. Reparation and repatriation, the undoing of taxonomies, the challenging of the assumptions, errors, and silences of the Universal Museum all came about within the reportage around the exhibition itself. One has to think also about the notion of cyclical time, as Naman prompted towards the very end of his exhibition, by calling for a representation of cyclical time, which is so common and so polyvalent within Indian cultural systems of representation and iconography. And therein, perhaps, these tensions between possession and dispossession might be tackled with differently, not through the hegemony of a linear time per se. I was reading also the poetry of Urdu poet of Kashmiri descent, Mira Ji, who states, "Should the gusts of wind come this way, then tell them there's nothing here that they could take away with them. There's nothing here that someone could look at and think, if only this were ours too." And here I felt again this tug at this question of belonging, possession, proprietorship, and these taxonomies that become a burden on our narrative capacities. And so I wanted to, leave us with that bit of poetry. Today we will have, as Prateek mentioned, first Dorian Chong and then Alessandro Vincentelli. Alessandro has been in conversation with Sky Arundhati Thomas and mentioned or prefaced how for him this is a time both of deep listening and deep adaptation. And so I welcome you to do both together with us in these sessions.